shameful theology and the impossibility of sex.
I saw that was that on your Secret
That's on.
Philosopher Society website?
That was something else that we did. This is
Oh, okay.
I do this online learning platform called H&Co, and we do courses on there.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
4 weeks of theology and sex, from purity culture and all of that bullshit.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And all of that bullshit. That's awesome. All right. So I just roll into things. I've already started recording. I just want to have an organic flow here and have a conversation, but there's so many amazing things I want to talk to you about from your book, Sex, God, and Rock and Roll. And first thing I want to start with is that I couldn't dismiss, as obvious, was the darkness, but the embracement of the darkness, but the melancholy and the suffering and the pain. You have such an awareness of it and an appreciation for it. And so one of the things that really, really stood out to me was when you wrote, I have dark days when the seductive lure of nothingness intoxicates me. And that resonated with me so deeply because I love getting lost in those dark moments because it helps me appreciate the light more. So can you tell me just a little bit about the darkness and why you decided to embrace it? Such a big question, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think it took us sort of a while to come to terms with it. I mean, you know, they used to call melancholy the English disease, and so I think I grew up always with that kind of weird occasional brain cloud that would just sort of descend, like for no real reason, and for the longest time, I think I just wanted to like not be that way, because I'd sort of find it really oppressive, and because I couldn't locate it. And it really wasn't until I started going really to therapy, and particularly analysis, and started reading Freud and stuff like that, and kind of working out the difference, particularly the difference between like mourning and melancholy, you know, and you know, that melancholy has no object, so it's this feeling that comes over you and stuff, and also sort of coming to terms with the fact that darkness is just a part of our existence. I mean, you know, I mean, to be really sort of blunt, you know, there's no day without night. You know, there's no, you know, we have light because we understand what darkness is. You know what I mean? And so I think, and sort of becoming aware of the conflicted nature of what it means to be a human. And I think for a while, in my middle years, when I was heavily involved in particular forms of Christianity that were essentially largely focused on kind of, I guess, perfectionism, or always, you know, being on the right side of everything, and having very little room for darkness. And I don't mean like demonic darkness. I mean just darkness, the complexity of what it means to be human. You know, it's kind of this one-dimensional focus on why you should be, you know, thankful, happy, grateful every single moment of the day, and I appreciate that, but that's just not a reality. You know, we don't live in that world, and so just through a period of time, I just began to realize that probably melancholy is something that I'm never going to shake off. In fact, to be quite honest, I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, hello. You know, it's like this familiar thing that just sort of drops in from nowhere. And you can spend an awful lot of time trying to work out where it's coming from. And sometimes you can, but I just decided that it was time to go, okay, this actually makes up part of me. I'm not, you know, and I've learned to manage it, because there have been moments where it's felt actually quite overwhelming, and I've sort of really had to put myself in places where I kind of was aware that if I didn't kind of take some steps, you know, things could get ugly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't mean to be trite about that, but you know, so I'm sensitive to the darkness that is in my world and in my life. But really, it was just going, yeah, this is what it means to be human. It's part of the dimension of the human experience. Not everybody perhaps is melancholy in the way that I am, but we all have our share of dark moments and dark times, and I think you know, maybe it was just I just and part of it was also resistance to the cultural pressure to be happy all the fucking time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say
No, we
that.
swear on this podcast. Yes, it's all good.
Yeah, that was one of the chapters that I actually left out was swearing, and I don't know why I did, because it's one of my favorite things to do. But anyway, you know, I just the cultural pressure always to be up and happy.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
And in America, it's the pursuit of happiness. And I
Yeah,
always say, but that's such a bunch of bullshit.
it's not even the truth of that statement, but yeah, I did this thing once in Los Angeles. I did an event with some friends called Against Optimism. It wasn't like just it wasn't meant to be ironic. It was actually really a, a statement that the happiness industry is an industry.
Yeah.
B, it creates a false pressure in people's lives that doesn't make room for the full breadth of humanity.
I agree.
And I think, you know, when you feel bad about your dark times or your dark moments, that's when you're the most vulnerable to it. When you can be open and go, yeah, sometimes I feel really rubbish, and sometimes I don't know what to do with this, and sometimes I kind of, I don't think I ever revel in it, but I know what it is now. So, and I know that sometimes things come from it that maybe wouldn't come some other way. I mean, I wouldn't prescribe it to anybody and say, oh, you should, you know, nice dose of melancholy, but, you know.
No, I get that. Yeah. Same for me. I notice a pattern of, and it's particularly autumn. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the farming schedule and the absence of my husband and the labor that's required and just the death of the season and all of it. But I had come to resent the impending autumn. And it sucked because it was my favorite time of the year too. And I just lost all appreciation for it. But I did start to look at it in this different sense of, this is a darkness for me and my mentality and for preparation and out of it. And I do get locked up in it, and I know what it is, but I kind of am like, this is just my shitty phase right now. You're just going to have to deal with it. I deal with it, but so much does blossom out of that even before the spring. And so it's something that I think more people should be willing to. I always feel like people are scared to admit they have sorrowful times or experience melancholy or just temporary depression. I mean, in Minnesota especially, and maybe you experience this too, we have darkness for 6 months. How can we not fall into some sort of
The funny thing, you know, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The funny thing is, you know, I lived in California for, you know, much of my adult life, where it's always sunny, but, you know, so I don't think I have like seasonal melancholy, because if I do, it's precipitated by sunshine. Actually, I kind of like gloomy weather and rain. I kind of like that kind of gothic, you know, gloom, that it doesn't bother me so much. But I do think that you know, that's the thing though. You know, there are the external markers that bring certain kinds of melancholy or darkness, just, you know, sorrow into your life, and then there are those inexplicable moments that have no rhyme or reason, that you could, you know, they just well up from your unconscious for whatever reason, and you can't find it. And I think that's what I came to terms with, that I don't know that I'll ever find like the real root cause of what that is. You get hints, you know, and obviously there are things that happen in life that make you sad and sorrowful, but there's also that thing that it just happens. And you know, and usually people go, well, what happened? And I'm like, well, nothing. I just woke up this way.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like that sometimes. But it's like that song, "Hello, Darkness, My Old Friend."
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, and that's the funny thing about it as well, is that, I mean, like I said, I don't revel in it, but it's a familiar ghost that haunts me now. and and there's a kind of, I wouldn't say I'm not necessarily friends with my darkness, but we're nodding acquaintances.
Yeah. No,
I
I can.
buy him a drink in the pub, you know.
Yeah, no, I get that too. And sometimes for me, it's like I will almost get so, I don't know if I get upset with myself, but I'm just like, and you really have no reason to feel this right now. What are you doing? Where
Yeah.
did this come from? But it does bubble up from nowhere. And you're like, okay, I guess we're just going to get through this and breathe. And I find that for me, just trying to be more quiet and silent and reflective, and maybe even additional meditation just helps keep me from allowing that darkness to become something more foul to the people in my proximity, so it
Yeah.
doesn't like affect them somehow.
Yeah.
So we go from this darkness, but you also have these kind of these radical nonconformist ideas. And I really liked what you you said about how we should take a clue from Dylan and play fucking loud. And that
Yeah.
kind of also bends a little bit towards what you say later about Einstein saying that we have to find our own voice and not be an echo.
Yeah.
And there was just, throughout your book, it was like your realization of the uniqueness of the individual and why that's so important. And there was something that really stuck out to me that I had been recognizing as of lately, I think just in the circles I was associating with. And it was that so many people end up just repeating what everybody else is saying
Yeah.
and quietly playing along within this harmony instead of jamming out and fucking something up on the guitar, or making some foreign sound, like you pointed out in one of your chapters, that these rare sounds are added into it, but doing something different that people are looking at it with this newness. And
Yeah.
there's so much of the repetition going on that reading something like that is just like, thank you, somebody is finally saying something different. And so, I mean, throughout your whole life, you've always been pushing against the status quo.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why. And again, on one level, I don't know that I'd recommend it, but by the same token, I think, I mean, I don't think, I'm not one of those people that walks around going, oh, you're special. You know, I don't believe that. I don't believe that people are, I think we're just human beings. I don't think anybody's really special. It's just, we have life, and I think part of the process of living is sort of being, or at least coming close to who you want to be in life. And part of the obstacle of life is that most of the people around you want you to be something else that they're comfortable with. You know, we're always figuring we can change one another. But I think very early on, I just felt that it was important to realize that you get one shot at life. I mean, as far as I can work out, I mean, I don't really have much of a theory of an afterlife. I don't know. That's the best I can do. You know what I mean? Maybe, but for now, I figure you've got one life to live, and therefore it ought to count. And there are two enemies: the enemies without and the enemy within. You know, I think we're our own biggest obstacle to the things that we want to see in our lives or do in our lives. And that story that I took from Dylan, well, you read this story, but it's a fairly famous one, you know, where he got called out and called a Judas when he switched from folk to electric. And after he got booed at a concert in England, and somebody yelled Judas, he sort of turned around to his band and said, "Play fucking loud." And they turned up and played like a Rolling Stone. You know what I mean? And I sort of took that as like a very, I mean, and I was already working on it, but to me it was like a great metaphor that you have to sometimes betray others and yourself in order to become the person that you want to be. Because in some ways, you know, people were like, they called him a Judas because he wasn't playing the music they wanted to hear anymore, which meant that essentially they didn't want him to be him. They wanted him to be who he was for them. But that wasn't what Dylan wanted. What Dylan wanted was to keep betraying himself so that he could become more who he wanted to be. You know what I mean? It's like putting off selves, you know, over and over and over. So the switch to, you know, it's like I went to see him in Santa Barbara right before I left LA 3 years ago, and he played in this kind of weird semicircle out of the spotlight. In this kind of semicircle with the band with a cowboy hat on. You couldn't see his face the whole time. He never moved to the front of the stage, and he sang 2 songs that people recognized. The rest were like covers, and all these people in the audience were yelling out for all these other songs. He just didn't give a shit. I mean, to me, I think in some ways, if you wanna experience like full-on punk music, just go to a Dylan show, because he will only give you what he wants to give you. And he really has no interest in catering to that. He doesn't want to betray himself in order to satisfy other people. And I betrayed myself for a long time. I was very kind of internal, shy, nervous about saying what I felt. And it cost me, because I would not say, and I'd let myself get into situations that I didn't want to be in because I didn't know how to get out of them, because to get out of them would mean saying what I really felt, and that might cause people not to like me or hurt me or you know, be upset with me and stuff like that. And so then what I would do was I would do something self-destructive so I could be the bad boy in a situation, you know what I mean? So it would all blow up, and then somehow that was better than just going, no, I don't want to do this, or I don't, that's not who I am, or that's not how I feel. And so, yeah, play loud. It's kind of, you kind of, and to me, it's the positive and negative act of betrayal.
Yeah. Yeah. And we often aren't willing to do that. Like,
No,
especially, do you see that in music today, that people are not playing fucking loud?
You know, I think, you know, I mean, everybody's got their own sort of trip, and it's hard for me, you know, you're never inside somebody else's head.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
I do know that there's an incredible amount of pressure, and it depends really what you want from life. You know, some people are quite happy to be a sort of puppet for somebody else, you know, to make music that somebody else gives them, you know, because they're happy making music. You know, not everybody's like Dylan or I don't know who it would be. You know what I mean? I mean, I think as human beings, we all have to sort of work out what negotiations and trade-offs we're going to make with our existence, you know, and there are always compromises. I mean, Dylan's still in the music business. You know, there's still that, you know, there's still stuff that he does that probably he'd rather not do. You know, I mean, I think he's probably in a position at this point where he can pretty much do whatever he wants. But I think it's always for me. And it's really funny because where that idea came from me, it happened very, very quite young, really. I read this biography of John Wesley, the preacher, you know, guy that founded Methodism and
Yep.
stuff. And there was a story in there where he used to go around. He was well known for like preaching, and he would travel around on horseback and give all these sermons, and people would just sort of copy them and then repeat them. And he sent out this, I don't know if it was a letter or a missive or word to these fledgling communities, and basically said every person should strive to be a voice and not an echo. And I mean, that stuck with me for 3 or 4 decades.
Yeah.
You know, be a voice, not an echo. And it's so, you know, we live today in so many echo chambers, you know, Instagram
Yes.
and you know, where the thing to do is to, you know, celebrate your uniqueness by being like everybody else. and I don't, that's not even a judgment. It's just it's the
It's just
nature
a
of
fact and reality. Yeah.
what we deal with. And the pressure is like, well, if you conform to this, you'll get what you want. Of course you won't, because you won't be true to yourself, and it won't actually give you what you want. It never does. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Play loud.
Yeah. Nope. I hear that. I've been under the wings of a couple of publisher houses who loved who I was until they didn't, and then wanted me to be something different. And I was like, you know what? I don't really even need to write a book. I'm good. Thanks. Bye. Not doing it.
Believe me.
But that's
talking
the norm I hear in the publisher houses too. But it is like that. It seems like if you're not willing to appease everybody, then you're going to get canceled, or you're going to get canceled before you even become worth anything canceling.
Basically, the drive is profit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, and so again, fair enough. If you're in the business of making money off things, and you've got your little formula for what you think will sell, but you know, you have to work out then, well, is that what I want to do? And if it isn't, how am I going to do what I want to do, and what will that cost me? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not that, I don't think I'm that brave. I just sort of reached a point where it was like, fuck it, I just can't do this anymore. It's soul destroying. So I just try to go, all right, so what do I think about all these things, and why am I so afraid of saying it? There's a world full of stupid ideas. Mine can't be that much more stupid. Maybe they are, but you know.
Yeah, it might be dumb, but I'm putting it out there anyway. I don't care. Someone might like it. That's kind of how I go with it. I'm like, someone might like what I'm writing, so we'll see.
Yeah, who said everybody has to like it?
Exactly. If I like it, it's good enough. So.
I mean, my theory is if everybody likes it, it's probably not that great.
You know,
but that's, you know, again.
Yeah, that's true though. It really is. I'm exactly like that though. If everyone's like, you got to see this movie, you got to see this movie, I'm like, you know what? I think it's weird that you all want me to see the same movie. Or don't read that book. Don't read that book. It's horrible. Then it's like, well, and I don't know if that's just my nature to do the opposite of what you tell me to do, but I go with that.
Yeah, well,
so your chapter on the other woman, so you pull apart this Luke verse, Luke 7:44, and I had never looked at it like that. And it was like, I read it for the first time that way. And it really stuck out to me. And it was when the Mary busts in when he's having dinner with Simon. And Simon's all like, oh, if he only knew what kind of trash was before him, da 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 da. And he says, do you see this woman? And it was like, oh my God, I never looked at it that way. But it was so on point for what I always believe that Jesus is doing, is pointing out that labels are irrelevant. Sure. And so the label blinds you to anything else about the person, because once you put a label on someone, that's all you see. And so that's exactly how I feel about labels. I reject labels. I don't want to identify by labels or be attached to them. But so many people can't not cling to those labels.
Yeah, especially unfortunately in religious worlds, which is the sort of real tragedy. And I, yeah, that story, you know, it's so weird because I mean, you know, I've been involved in Christianity for a long time, and it's funny how you read something and then you see something that you hadn't seen before. And it wasn't, you know, it was the drama of it, you know, because it actually says, looking at the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? So, you know, if you sort of think about how that dynamic, you've got three people and I'm looking at you and I'm saying to the other person, do you see Danielle? Uh, how can you not? But he actually could, because he's blinded by his prejudices. You know, she's not a woman; she's a sinner or a prostitute or whatever she is. And I think that just sort of, because to me, Christianity is about the unconditional. That's what Derrida called it. You know, it's about the unconditional call and the unconditional response, you know, where you love with no return, where you forgive with no price, where you can't quantify and you don't ask why. You just, it's just unconditional. And
Yeah.
that's very, very difficult because, you know, we always want to condition everything. You know, eat your vegetables, you can have dessert. You know what I mean? And I understand, you know, there are certain occasions maybe when it's called for, but maybe when it comes to like eating vegetables before you get your, you know, chocolate cake. But I think in the larger scheme of life, it gets very complicated and sad when, and we all do it. I mean, and I still do it, you know, I mean, I still judge and label people. I mean, I'm brutal because, you know, I can be caustic and sarcastic and cynical, you know, really well. I do those things really good. So, you know, I can, but in the larger sense, there's this need to see people for what they are, which is, even if they're assholes, and there are a lot of assholes in the world.
Sure, yeah. Yep,
A lot
there
of
are.
floated to the surface of our respective cultures at the moment, and are throwing their crap around like nobody's business.
Yes.
Um, and it's very difficult to sort of look with compassionate. But I try and remember. I mean, a few years ago, I got a phone call from this guy it was from some Christian magazine, and they were doing a thing on leadership values, and they said, you know, can you give us one value that you live by? And I said, yeah, I'm trying to not be as big an asshole today as I was yesterday. And there was a little bit of silence, and the guy said, that's really good, but I don't think we can use it. I meant
Why
it.
not? It's
But,
simple. Very
but
simple.
I meant it because I know what I can be, but that's not my aspiration. But I'm also aware of the contradictions and the complexities of what it means to be human.
Yeah, you know the monster within.
Yeah, right. And everybody's got one, you know, and nobody's perfect, and everybody's got their stuff. And that also doesn't mean that I don't think things should be addressed. I do think that, you know, that's not a get out of jail free card for people. I mean, I do think sometimes things have to be called for what they are in very serious ways, and that demands action and protest and all those things, you know. Doesn't mean you have to, you know, in a world without peace, to say peace it's not enough. You have to act to see peace realized. But yeah, that story, I know, again, it's another one of those little things in life that you don't shake, or, you know, it just sticks with you. And that was really why I saw, that was the kind of thing that I was trying to say in the whole book, really, was that I don't view life as this big overarching thing, but it's just all these little bits and pieces that sometimes have profound significance. And when you sort of separate it from everything else, it's not even that much. I mean, that story is probably the most important encounter of my entire religious experience, if you want to know the truth.
Wow.
I would say that if I was going to sort of summarize it, it would probably be that story was the most impactful on me all the way around.
The conviction to see a person and not the label, and to see the
and
humanity.
that was a funny thing, because that's actually what I was on the hunt for in the first place. I got sort of waylaid by religious baggage. But what I really wanted was, I wanted to be a deeper, richer human being. And I wanted to treat people with the dignity and respect that human beings deserve for actually making it through the day.
Which is what I thought Christianity was supposed to be geared towards as well. But it turns out not so much.
Not so much, unfortunately, no.
No.
Well, I mean, yeah, it gets complicated for sure. It's because we want conditions. It's like, you know, if you say, well, it's just all about love, and they go, well, it can't just be all about love, you know, there has to be blah. Well, I don't know, actually, because I think the simpler you make it, the more complex it actually becomes. You know, the more you reduce it down to one or two things, the harder it is. You can distract yourself by making a business out of conditions.
I agree. So we go from labels, and you had mentioned that, you know, of course we should speak out against things.
Yeah.
Now, there's a line that you quote Bruce Springsteen on: sometimes we have to learn to tolerate that which we can't rise above. And that really struck me, because that's something that I've heard before in a different way as well. And it's really hard to hold on to that and want to actualize that when, especially in the United States right now, we have going on what we have going on. We have Black Lives Matter protests. We have clashing of different advocates and protesters. We have police brutality. We have Trump. We have all of these things going on right now, this chaos, which I'm hoping will lead us to something a little bit more organized and evolved. But what would be your recommendation for that? Like, taking that verse or that quote from Springsteen, how do we?
Well, I think in some ways, if I'm not mistaken, Springsteen was talking about kind of in a kind of personal way, sort of, you know, coming to terms with the fact that, because I think he also said you sort of have to learn to deal with your own darkness.
Yeah.
You know, to realize that you've got that, and I think that the fine line is that I don't see that as an escape clause for not acting against things that diminish the world. And I think that, and it's funny, I think that we live in a time that really calls for a level of social and cultural action like never before from people who've not really done those things before. I mean, I really do. And I think that can be done without just getting into a slanging match with somebody. It's, you know, it's what you act for as much as what you stand against. You know, you can say, you know, I'm behind Black Lives Matter until you're blue in the face, but how are you? Are you just a sort of ally, or actually are you going to do what, you know, roll up your sleeves and get involved and see if you can help make things more just? And you know what I mean? It doesn't mean you have to like rant about the other side of the equation and get caught up in, you know, because it's not really I mean, there are contradictions in in life, in everything. And I think we sort of have to realize that life is full of contradictions. I mean, to be honest, I think that's Trump's big mistake. He's always trying to go, well, you know, they try and get him to, and I don't mean to get political, but, you know, they want him to say he's against white supremacy. He's like, yeah, but, you know, the left's got a problem too, you know. Well, yeah, but that's not the issue. That's the contradiction. You know, there are contradictions there, but you kind of have to go, yeah, but racism, the end. You know, there's problems on the left, on the right, in the center, and everywhere. But I do think, we also have to sort of realize that things don't get solved on usually on the grand scale.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, it's like usually it's on the micro scale, like one step at a time. It's like, you know, I mean, I sort of came of age in the brand of Christianity that was all about, you know, reaching the whole world for God, you know, that whole, you know, we're going to reach the whole world and stuff like that. It's like, well, sure, but what about just your neighbor?
Yeah.
Like, you know, three or four people that actually their lives are enriched because you're in it.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if we overwhelm ourselves with the great concern of the earthly collective. We take ourselves outside of a circumference of like actual impact and just burden ourselves with concerns and worries. And I just think, okay, and was it what, I can't remember who said it, but it was like, if you can't make it work inside your house, you got no business trying to make it work outside the world. And so for me, that's just a reminder to pull in close. And like, for instance, if I'm advising other people about erotic embodiment, but I'm not advising the people that I live with about it, what am I doing? Right. And so we often think we have to help this group, or this person was impacted over here on this other side of the world. And I'm all about charity for people. But I think, when was the last time you extended your hand to your neighbor, or even to your spouse, or to your adult child, or somebody where you were like, and also I can put this energy here, and this is an impact that will change the world and that will have a ripple effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we can have this sort of grand desire for global transformation, you know, and we can want that. And I think we should want those things, you know, for those stuff. And I think we should do what we feel we can to help that. But I also think that it's local transformations that, in a sense, have a ripple effect in that regard. So again, it's holding those things in a little bit of tension, but the idea that, you know, it's always, well, what's the big plan? Well, really, it's like, what's the little plan?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the one that always that's like the stone in your shoe. you know what I mean? That's I mean, years ago, sorry, I don't know if we're waffling too much, but years ago in this community that I was involved in, we decided that we were sort of over sermons and stuff. And so we decided that instead of getting together on Sundays, and we were still getting together on Sundays then, and having somebody like preach a sermon, we were all going to pick one verse from the Bible and live that verse out for a year. And every week we got together, we'd all talk about how that was going. Nightmare year.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I picked love your enemies.
Oh.
You go big. Oh, love my enemies. How hard can that be? If all I got to do is love my enemies. Well, then you suddenly realize, wow, a lot of people don't like me. And the problem is, I like them even less. So now what?
How do you love someone that you can't stand?
You know, and it's like, actually, you can't. You just have to learn to tolerate them. But my point is that the lesson in all of that was we reduced it all down. And it was the same pretty much for all of my friends that were involved. It was like, geez, if we'd had another year to think, we'd have picked something vaguer, like, you know, like weep over the city or something, you know. I don't know what it would be, or like take a cup of water to a beggar. I don't know, to pick something, you know, get drunk, you know, because in Proverbs it says, let the poor get drunk to forget their troubles. So we'd have all been drinking and been fine, but instead we all went big, you know, with the big themes, and then came face to face with our inability to act in a kind of local way like that. It was brutal.
My goodness. Yeah, I don't think I could do that, especially loving my enemies. My husband works with two of my enemies, his dad and brother. And like literally in my yard, we live on the main farm site where they operate. And it is like today, honestly, I was like hanging laundry. There's some drama going on with my husband and them right now because it's the end of the season and nobody wants to do it the other person's way. And I'm honestly out there going, how do you pray for a motherfucker like this? Like, how, God, how? Like, what? Right? Like, I can't right now because I don't even, where do the words even come from? And that would be my struggle, because there are some people where I'm like, I'm not God, so I don't have to, you know, like, I can't love you like that. But it's the challenge too. And I mean, for a long time, I was getting beat up pretty good because I was willing to love Trump the enemy and go, now, wait a minute, let's look at this. Let me play devil's advocate. And then that gets you caught up in that whole label and identification. And what really sucks is when I'm trying to apply some kind of Bible verse over towards, and that applies to Trump, people are like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't apply to Trump. And I'm like, but well, if we can't learn to see the human in Trump, how am I supposed to? And I mean, it is hard. So we go back to that. A lot of people have much stronger opinions against Trump than I do.
Yeah.
And so again, how do you do that? How do you love the enemy?
Yeah.
One day at a time?
Yeah, maybe never. I mean, I don't know.
Never.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's, I mean, I kind of, I mean, there are lots of people I just don't like.
Yeah. And then the question is, do we have to love them then? If they're not in our proximity?
I don't think you do. And,
yeah.
But there again, I don't, you know, I also don't think I have to spend all of my time, therefore, arguing about why they shouldn't. I'll just withhold it.
Yeah,
and you know,
true.
I mean, I mean, politics right now is complicated.
It is.
But I mean, Britain is mired in its own madnesses as well, you know. And these are troubling times. This kind of rise of populism and nationalism, and kind of this kind of nostalgia for a world that never really existed anyway, that benefits some people at the expense of others, that actually undermines the whole idea that we've been living with for a while. You know, it's very worrying. And, you know, and we don't really talk about, there's no real discourse anymore. There's just, you know, everybody gets really primal. It's like, you know, Neanderthal.
Yeah, it really is. And
I completely I completely I mean, I have very strong opinions. I mean, I grew up essentially a left-wing socialist, and I left my whole life. And that doesn't mean that I think the left has all the answers, but I'm not a big fan of, you know, the rich doing okay and everybody else getting screwed over in the name of profit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all the stuff that goes with it. And I think it's reached this apex where just things that have been simmering have just been unleashed by ignorance, you know. Not just, I mean, I'll say this, I have more of a problem with the Republicans than I even do with Trump. Trump is Trump. I mean, I don't know, whatever, you know. I mean, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say, and nothing to say that I think is of any value. But the desperate willingness to hold on to power at the expense of actually having a conscience, that worries me. Anyway, should we be talking about sex?
We can move along to that. Actually, there is something that I wanted to, it kind of struck me and I was like, I don't agree, but hold on. And it's fine, but it was just interesting. So, you wrote, any and all sexual encounters are ultimately an encounter with ourselves. And I love that. I
Yeah.
totally agree. But I was wondering, so you said that, okay, where was it? It was the desire thing. It was Alan Baidu.
Yeah.
Love focuses on the very being of the other, on the others. It has erupted, fully armed with its being, into my life, that it is consequently disrupted and refashioned. That really stuck out to me, because that's kind of like where I'm at right now, is this other oriented kind of understanding that even in desire, your desire is not necessarily for yourself. It's always other oriented, because without you, or without other, there is no you. Kind of that whole Jean-Luc Marion
Yeah.
ideology.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, my opinion on all this stuff, to be honest, changes a lot. I think, well, I think two things. I think that quite often our desire is misplaced.
How so?
In that, I think we um, project what we deeply desire onto somebody, but the desire that we actually have is deeper. It goes beyond that person.
Mm.
It's desire for something more than just the other. It's a sort of desire for like Lacan, the psychoanalyst, said that, you know, there is no sexual relation, that in an encounter between two people, um, there's something more going on than what's between those two people, and what's between those two people is actually almost an obstacle to what they're both trying to get at, which is that we have desire, and we put our desire on things that actually, if you like, are a little bit of an obstacle to our desire, but we can't really get that desire anyway. I think it's complicated, I guess, is what I'd say.
So the other is sort of like a
So
substitute.
that the other person doesn't matter, and I wouldn't want you to think that that's what I'm.
Oh, no, I don't think that.
I just think that there's an awful lot of projection when it comes to how we interact with people, and I think particularly when it comes to sexual desire, because it's so in so many ways culturally shaped and then personally lived out, that it's almost like you're screening your own sexual movie onto another person, and they become, to some degree or another, a respondent to that, you know, because I mean, and I'm talking about this in terms of relationships. So it's not like they're a blank canvas. You're obviously projecting that onto them because something about them, whether it's chemistry, physicality, intellect, you know, the combination of all those things that make someone appealing to us, they become part of the picture. I just think the desire sort of bleeds beyond the canvas of that thing. That's kind of what I was trying to get at, I think. I'm not sure that I was, you know, I mean, I read a lot of philosophy, but I'm always a bit reluctant to kind of quote philosophers, though, because there's always the world of ideas that is in that sort of paragraph. But I do think that desire is a very, and I think we live in a world where desire, false desire, is what dominates, because we live in a mediated world, a world of marketing and advertising. We've been schooled to want
the mimetic desire that we're influenced by, maybe too.
Yeah, you know, all the desire that kind of we're told that we, you know, this is the way we should be wanting things, and we react to those even when we think we're not. So I think in some ways it was really more trying to say there's more to this than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And
No, I
it's,
like that actually, though, that it kind of like bleeds over the canvas, and that, and I think Marianne says something like this too, in that desire then essentially resituates itself as desire again. It's never actually fully satisfied.
which is
Yeah.
why I think in some ways monogamy can be problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Not for everybody, but for some people. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
and the whole working out of our sexual desires, especially when it gets constrained and limited by kind of naive prescriptions that
Yeah.
actually, like I said to you earlier, I'm going to be teaching this class about sex and stuff, and starting with the whole dynamic of purity culture and abstinence in Christianity. And, you know, I mean, St. Augustine basically said that, you know, desire was the enemy of his spiritual growth, and that, you know, Adam and Eve, their sin wasn't sex. Sex was the punishment for their sin.
Mm.
If you want to know how fucked up Christianity is, you go back 1,500 years and you have the initiation of a negation of desire and physicality and intimacy
Yeah.
and sexuality, and you go, oh well, I'm not a Christian, or I'm not this, I'm not. But the history of Western sexuality is rooted in Judeo-Christian concepts about the body
Yeah.
and
And the split from the body, from the spirit.
and desire was one of the first things to go. And now we live in a culture where essentially we're fed false desire all the time, and yet we think we know what we want all the time. And my
Yeah.
theory is we really don't. And
Yeah.
that's what happens in people in a relationship. They get in a relationship and they see this person and they think it's the answer to their deepest desire. And it isn't, because that's not what happens between people. We're not the answer to our deep desires. We're human beings who have to work out our shit together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But no, it's true.
That can,
Yeah.
I mean, there's beauty in that, and that's one of the great aspects again of being human. But I think it's, yeah, it's just, I guess on one level it's just it's complicated. Well, you know, you deal with you deal with people.
It is. It's very complicated because we don't understand our desires, or we're ashamed of our desires, or we're scared of them,
Yeah,
or they're socially constructed desires, like you pointed out.
yeah.
And even when we are given permission to satiate those desires, we're still hungry. Like we're still hungry for something. Like I can admit to that too. Like,
Well, of
you know,
course.
what's funny is I tripped over the weekend. Like I dropped acid for the very first time on Saturday
Oh,
with my
wow, good.
son.
Oh,
And
wow, that's so interesting. Like
and
full or micro dosing.
no, it was a full tab. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing was, like, you know, my son and his girlfriend were here, and my husband was like watching me, and everybody was just waiting for this big thing, and they kept going, so, you know, how is it? And I was like, it's amazing. Like I feel everything. Like I feel everything.
Mm.
But I was hungry and thirsty beyond belief. It was like I had unlocked something, because I'm so busy. Sometimes I don't eat, but I
Sure.
drink water like nonstop. But that was like this overarching, like repetition in my head was, why am I so hungry and thirsty? I'm so hungry and thirsty. And I had to jot all these thoughts down while I was doing this too, because I wanted to like document it.
Mm.
And it just kept coming back to me that that's like what we're all dealing with, is this hunger, but we don't know how to satisfy it. And we're so thirsty and hungry for something,
Yeah.
and we don't know what. And if we say, I don't know what, then now we don't even know ourselves or what we want. And how dare we?
Yeah. Although, I mean, you know, again, I'm quoting another Lacan quote, but you know, Lacan talks about the fact that, you know, the central issue with at the heart of us is lack.
Mm-hmm.
That what we're dealing with is lack, a lack that can't be satisfied. And I think this is where my beef with like well-being and happiness industry lies, because it
Mm-hmm.
promises satisfaction. It's my big problem with Christianity, is that it promises satisfaction, and we don't actually know what will truly satisfy, I don't think, and
Mm-hmm.
B, I don't think we can achieve full satisfaction, and I think we have to come to terms with the lack at the heart of what it means to be human. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Actually,
Yeah.
and we live all of our life with all the stories that we tell ourselves that attempt to fill up that lack. And I think one of the interesting things about LSD, or acid or whatever, this mind altering drugs, is they kind of do expose the narrowness of our rationales for existence. The way I mean, I don't think you can live in a permanent state of tripping. That probably wouldn't be great, but
No.
but it's a really interesting way to realize the constructs that we live by are way more porous and incomplete than we imagine. And yeah, I mean, we are hungry and thirsty, and that can get. I mean, I think that's probably where sometimes addiction comes from. You can't name that hunger and thirst. You just know you're hungry and thirsty. You just keep gobbling stuff up and
Mm-hmm.
trying to satiate it. And I don't think at the end, and maybe this comes all the way back around to that whole thing about darkness and melancholy, is there is like this lack at the heart, and to come to terms with that is actually a healthy thing. It's a healthy thing, I think, to be able to go, yeah, I'm not going to be fully satisfied, because I don't think that's what the business of life is all about. But
Mm-hmm.
by the same token, the more I become aware of that, the more satisfying things become, because they don't
Yeah.
achieve final fulfillment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
bullshit.
Well, yeah. And what if the point of coming here is to experience dissatisfaction? Because maybe we're always satisfied on the other side, you know?
Welcome to planet Earth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there is dissatisfaction in life, and nobody said. I mean, it can only be privilege to presume that we're above satisfaction. I mean, half the world is trying to scrape enough together
Yeah.
to eat on a day. We're so, without getting too, we're so fortunate to have what we have, even though we
Absolutely.
don't have what we think we deserve or want or stuff like that. But there's an awful lot of people who go through life without the opportunity to even think about their level of satisfaction, because they're just trying to stave away starvation,
Yeah.
level of hunger or thirst. But yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that I mean, I actually took quite a lot of LSD when I was younger, and I always found it kind of a fascinating experience in what rises up.
Mm-hmm.
In, and it's great too, I think, when I mean, because there's a lot of language around drugs, like there is around religion. You know what I mean? And it's almost
Yeah.
like experience. Then I think I might have written about that there or somewhere else, but the language sometimes sets you up to think that it should happen like this. But sometimes, if you just let it be what it is, you make discoveries about yourself, and they don't have to have any importance to anybody else but you. I mean, you don't have to see
Yeah.
God. You just have to know how thirsty you are sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I was hoping to see God. Like I asked, my son had done it a couple weeks ago, it was so funny. He texted me. He's like, "Hey, Ma, got any tips on LSD?" And I was like, "Nope, I am virgin to that still." And he's like, "Wait, you are?" And he's like, "Okay, well, I'm tripping right now. So you got any advice?" And I was just like, "Be safe, make smart decisions, say hi to God." And he was really bummed he didn't see God. And so that was the one thing he kept asking me, "Do you see God? Do you see God?" And I just said, "I see God in all of you. What are you talking about? God's right
Yeah.
here."
Well, it's interesting how, I mean, well, it's very interesting, you know, in like the counterculture in the 60s and 70s when, you know, acid first became sort of popular and broke out of, you know, institutional environments. It was all about consciousness raising and finding God and becoming one with the universe and stuff. And the opposite end of the spectrum is now, you know, with microdosing and stuff like that. It's all about, you know, medicating.
Productivity.
Yeah, well, it's all about,
Yeah.
you know, dealing with anxiety and panic and even, you know, issues around death and stuff like that. And I think probably it's a little bit of both that you need. You know, they're both languages that shape it, but I think you can always be open to a bigger experience than just coping with anxiety, but also sometimes that's a big enough help too. You
Yeah.
know.
And I think I've heard too, it's being used to treat PTSD.
Yeah.
And so, and I mean, why I can't remember if I read about this or not, but the idea came to me while I was on it was this could be the next female Viagra. I'm just putting it out there. It was incredible in that area.
Well, yeah. I mean that you. I mean, the interesting thing about, you know, intoxicants of all kinds is they loosen up your boundaries and your borders. I mean,
Yeah.
and that can be a really helpful thing as well, which I think is why microdosing for things like anxiety and panic, because they're quite often rooted in a need to sort of control the
Yeah.
uncontrollable and
Yeah.
the awareness that you're not in control, but it's going to be okay. You know, you can be cocooned and feel safe and stuff, but also liberated in your body. I mean, I think I took quite a lot of drugs. I was a bit of a druggie when I was younger. And I mean, I
What I mean, you were with ACDC. Oh, you took drugs? That's so unheard of.
funny is they were not druggies.
Yeah.
In fact, I sort of had to lie to get the job because they didn't want people doing drugs around them.
Well,
Angus,
that's very responsible.
The guitar player, is a teetotaler.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, I mean, there were issues, but it was mostly around drink, and I'm not a drinker. But what I was going to
Mhm.
say was I took a lot of drugs, and I think it was because I just wanted to feel a little bit looser in life, and I was very inhibited emotionally when I was
Mm.
younger. You know, just that kind of fear, insecurity about how people perceive me, and I just wanted to be a little more. Funnily enough, I wanted to be in my body more, even though
Yeah.
drugs, in a sense, supposedly get you out of your body. But I actually found that I was in my body more
I
aware. You know what I
yeah, I was aware of
mean?
everything. I
Yeah.
just and I
And,
wanted everything to touch me, and I could like when I laughed, it was like I could feel everything in my face.
oh,
But the liberation thing, it was like my laughter was liberated. I said exactly what was on my mind, and I didn't have to
yeah.
worry about what I was saying. It was a phenomenal experience that I mean, I don't understand why they withhold from people, but then at the same turn I do,
Yeah.
because I think we're easier to control when we're all angry and divided. And if we're all happy and liberated
Well,
and
yeah, that was
connective,
doing,
then we're like,
that was
fuck you. We ain't listening to you. We good. Bye.
always just get everybody to drop acid and the world would be a better
Thank
place.
you. I know. Or smoke cannabis every day. It's like, do it, guys.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And have sex all the time.
There you go.
Make the world a happy place.
As long as it's good sex. Well, actually, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, Well, you know, a little LSD would make all sex good sex. So there you go. Two
Yeah.
birds, one stone.
See a whole new horizon in your work.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, and I also have to pee. So, Barry Taylor, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for your book. Amazing contribution. And I really appreciate your perspective and your words and your art, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you and lovely to chat. So,
All right. Well, you take care, and hopefully we can chat again.
yeah, let's do it. Be
All
great.
right. Bye-bye.